I never believed in abductions until the night the ceiling split open above me. My name is Elena Cruz. I'm 33, a nurse in a small Arizona town, and I was lying in bed replaying the day in my head when a beam of white light pinned me in place, my body frozen, my breath locked. I felt myself lifted upward through the roof into a space that shouldn't exist. Walls glowing, air metallic. A shadow leaned over me, tall, thin, its eyes vast and black. A hand reached toward my face and cold flooded through me like ice water poured straight into my veins. My chest locked. I tried to scream, but no sound came. The room around me wasn't a room at all, but a sphere of light with no corners, no seams. The table beneath me felt alive, pulsing faintly under my back. The figure's hand hovered an inch from my forehead, and the moment it touched, I felt memories flicker and vanish, flashes of my own childhood. Places I'd never been. Voices in a language I shouldn't understand whispering inside my head. Another shape slid into view carrying something long and needle-thin that glowed at the tip. I wanted to turn away, but my body wouldn't obey. The hum in the chamber rose until it became a vibration inside my bones, and then the light fractured into the thousands of shards above me, each one vibrating in rhythm with my heartbeat. My vision blurred as if my eyes were no longer mine. Voices pressed into my skull all at once, questions in a language that felt older than thought itself. I saw shapes moving beyond the glow, tall and skeletal, their silhouettes bending like liquid. One of them leaned closer, its face inches from mine, its eyes black pools that swallowed everything. I felt the table tilt, or maybe it was my body sinking, and just before I lost sense of where I ended and they began, something sharp grazed my skin, and cold needles of electricity raced through every vein. My teeth clenched against the pressure building inside my skull. I tried to hold on to a single thought. My name, my age, anything that proved I was still human. But each memory slipped like water through my fingers. The figures circled me in silence, their hands moving with impossible precision. One raised a device that pulsed with its own light, hovering above my chest. The glow pierced straight through skin and bone. I felt my heart stutter, my breath vanish. The air thickened until it tasted metallic. I wanted to scream, to beg, but the sound never formed. Something heavy pressed down on me, vision collapsing into a tunnel. And as I realized they were opening me without a blade, the light snapped again, and everything dissolved into black warmth slid back into my body like a tide reversing. I opened my eyes and I was no longer on the table, but standing barefoot on a floor that felt like smooth stone yet rippled slightly under my weight. The chamber around me had changed. Walls stretching up into a darkness so deep it looked endless. Faint symbols glowed on every surface like constellations moving in slow spirals. Ahead of me, a doorway of pure light shimmered, and inside it silhouettes shifted. Tall, thin, but different from the ones before. They didn't move toward me. They waited, silent, watching. I tried to step forward, and my foot landed somewhere else entirely. The space bent, each step taking me sideways, though I was walking straight. The glow of the doorway pulsed faster, and I felt it pulling at my chest like a magnet. A whisper brushed the inside of my skull. Not a word, but a summons. My skin prickled and the floor under me began to sink as if I was being lowered. My breath caught, and just as I reached out to touch the edge of the light, everything around me shifted again. The air thickened until every breath scraped my throat. I blinked and the chamber dissolved into something that looked like a corridor. Walls seamless and glowing with veins of blue fire. I wasn't walking anymore. I was being carried forward without moving my legs. Figures appeared ahead, 4 of them. Aligned perfectly as if rehearsed, their faces hidden in the glare, only their eyes visible, enormous and unblinking. They tilted their heads in unison, and I felt the weight of their gaze press against my skull. Memories I didn't want to recall flashed uncontrollably, childhood moments twisted with scenes I had never lived. I tasted metal. I smelled ozone, and then the corridor split into 3 passages, each one pulsing with a different color. My body turned toward the one glowing red, though I fought against it, the pull stronger than anything I had ever felt. The closer I came, the louder the hum inside my bones grew, until it drowned out every thought except one. They were leading me somewhere I was never meant to see. I crossed the threshold of the red corridor, and the hum became a pulse that matched my heartbeat. The walls narrowed until they almost touched my shoulders, and then opened without warning into a vast hall filled with towering shapes that weren't machines, but weren't alive either. Translucent structures breathing slowly like giant lungs, their surfaces etched with moving symbols I couldn't read but somehow understood as instructions. The figures stopped behind me and I felt them watching as I stumbled forward, the floor soft but cold under my feet. In the center of the hall, a raised platform spun slowly, and on it lay a shape my size wrapped in a thin, shimmering membrane, its outline eerily familiar. My breath caught as I realized it was me, or a version of me. Perfectly still, eyes closed, skin faintly glowing. My hand lifted on its own toward the figure, and before my fingers could touch the surface of the membrane, the pulse in the room spiked. The symbols on the walls flared white, and the voice that had been whispering at the edge of my thoughts finally spoke a single word inside my skull. A word I didn't know but somehow recognized. And everything froze mid-motion. The frozen moment felt like a photograph of reality, every glow suspended, even my own breath hanging in my chest. The figures stood motionless behind me like statues, yet their eyes still locked onto mine. The shape on the platform flickered once as if a ripple passed through its body. Then its eyes snapped open, and they were my eyes, looking straight back at me. A rush of memories slammed into my head. Fragments of procedures, corridors, other people's voices, too fast to catch. The voice returned, louder now, repeating the same alien word over and over until it dissolved into something I could almost understand. Integration. My knees buckled. Light poured out of the platform and wrapped around me like liquid glass, pulling me toward the double of myself. My fingers brushed its skin, and for a split second I felt my own heartbeat echoing from inside it. A surge of vertigo tearing at my senses, and then everything began to tilt. The hall, the light, the second body, all of it collapsing inward like water down a drain. As I was pulled with it into darkness, I fell, but there was no wind. Only a slow tumbling through blackness laced with faint red threads like veins. My stomach flipped, and yet my body felt weightless. The last image of the hall dissolved above me, and ahead a dim glow grew brighter until it formed a circle beneath me. I hit it softly as if landing on warm sand. The glow spread under my feet and took the shape of a spiral staircase, disappearing downward into nothing. Voices whispered from below. Not words, but pulses of thought, familiar and alien at the same time. I tried to step back, but my heel touched empty space. The stair pulled me forward with each breath until my body moved without my decision. The glow thickened, and at the bottom I saw a doorway like liquid metal rippling on its surface, shadows of countless figures, human and not, flickering like memories trapped in film frames. My pulse slowed to match the doorway's pulse, and as I raised my hand, the surface parted soundlessly, opening into a chamber of total darkness waiting for me to enter. The darkness tore open like fabric ripped down the middle, and I stumbled forward, gasping. Cold night air rushed into my lungs. I blinked, and the stars above were the same I'd always known. The smell of dry earth, the outline of my house at the edge of the field. My legs buckled, and I dropped to my knees on the gravel driveway, my skin still tingling with the echo of their light. I pressed my hands into the dirt, just to feel something real. The silence was crushing. No hum, no voices, just the distant bark of a dog somewhere down the road. I staggered toward the porch, each step heavy, every shadow around me suspicious. My front door was half open, though I remember locking it. Inside, the clock on the wall glowed 3:17 a.m., but my phone said 2 days had passed. I stared at the screen, trying to understand, my chest heaving. And just as relief began to trickle in that I was home, I felt the faintest itch behind my ear, a warmth spreading under the skin as if something small and unseen had been left inside me. And the realization hit that being back on Earth didn't mean I was free. I stumbled through the doorway of my house, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys. Every sound inside felt wrong. The refrigerator hum, the clock ticking, even the creak of the floorboards under my weight. I checked the mirror, and for a moment I didn't recognize my own reflection. My skin pale, eyes rimmed red, and that faint pulse behind my ear growing sharper like something alive. I splashed water on my face, but the metallic taste didn't leave my mouth. I reached for my phone, desperate to call someone to prove I was here, but the screen lit with missed messages from days I couldn't remember, people asking where I'd been. My heart lurched as I scrolled further and saw one unanswered call after another. I sank to the floor, clutching the device, whispering to myself that I was home. I was safe. But then the light above the kitchen table flickered once, twice, in a rhythm that matched the pulse in my skull, and I realized they hadn't really let me go. I sat in the kitchen under the flickering bulb, every second stretching thin, the pulse behind my ear sharpening until it throbbed in time with the light overhead. I pressed my fingers against the spot and felt a tiny ridge that hadn't been there before, like a scar or a seam, Panic clawed at me as I searched the drawers for anything sharp to dig it out, but my hand froze halfway, not by choice. My body locked for a breathless instant, and in that silence a voice slid into my mind, clear and cold. "We are monitoring your return." I dropped the knife. My knees buckled. Outside the window the night was still empty, but I knew if I stepped out I'd see them, waiting, watching, and the worst part was the thought I couldn't shake. Maybe they had never really sent me back at all. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles went white, forcing myself to breathe, counting each inhale just to feel something I could control. The voice faded, but the pulse behind my ear kept beating like a second heart. I stumbled to the front door and opened it. Cold air slapped my face. The yard was exactly as I'd left it, yet wrong in ways I couldn't name. The tree line farther back. The star shifted, the porch light casting a shadow of me that didn't quite match my movement. I stepped onto the grass and the shadow lagged behind for a fraction of a second before catching up. My stomach turned. I backed up toward the house, but the front door was now closed, though I hadn't touched it. I spun around, heart pounding, and saw faint footprints in the frost leading from the field to where I stood. The size and shape of my own, but deeper, fresher, as if someone who looked like me had just walked home. First I crouched and touched the prints. The frost melted instantly under my fingers, leaving a damp outline, and a smell of metal rose from the ground like a warning. My pulse hammered so hard I felt it in my teeth. I backed toward the door again, but the prints kept appearing ahead of me. One by one, as if invisible feet were walking backward into the house, I lunged and yanked the door open. Inside, every light was on, though I had left them off. My own coat hung on the chair, but it was wet and streaked with a reddish dust I'd never seen before. On the table lay my phone, screen glowing, recording a voice memo I didn't remember starting. My own voice speaking calmly about coordinates and integration status. I grabbed it, hands trembling, and the last words on the recording were mine, but not mine. Phase 2 begins when she accepts she never left. I dropped the phone. The screen went dark, and the kitchen fell into silence, broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. My reflection in the window stared back at me, pale, exhausted, but mine again. I pressed both hands to the counter and forced myself to breathe. The vibration behind my ear eased to a faint throb and then slipped away as if it had never been there. The hum I thought I'd heard above the house was gone too, leaving only the ordinary creaks of the floor and the distant sound of a truck passing on the highway. The room smelled of coffee grounds and dust, familiar, grounding. I slid down to the floor, knees shaking, clutching at the cool tiles just to prove I was home. Everything looked unchanged, too normal, almost boring, and that sudden return to reality was more terrifying than the light itself because I couldn't tell where the nightmare had ended and my life was supposed to begin again. I sat there on the kitchen floor until the chill from the tiles crept up my arms and legs and my breathing finally slowed. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. A car passed outside. It was all so ordinary it felt surreal. I got up slowly, touching the counter, the door frame, the wall, anything solid to convince myself it was real. The faint taste of metal was gone from my mouth. The spot behind my ear no longer pulsed. It just felt like skin. I went to the window and pushed it open, and cold air came in, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine. No lights in the sky, no shapes in the field, just my yard, my fence, my neighbor's dog barking somewhere in the distance. I grabbed my phone from the floor and the screen was dark, and when I swiped it awake, there were no recordings, no strange messages, only a few old notifications. For a moment, I wondered if I'd fallen asleep at the table and dreamed it all. My watch showed the right time and date. Nothing was missing, my house exactly as I had left it. And I stood there in the silence, heart still beating hard, trying to decide if I'd just returned or if I'd never left at all. I forced myself to move from the window and check each room. The doors and windows were locked from the inside. Nothing looked touched. I opened the fridge and the food was still there, fresh. The power hadn't gone out. I checked my calendar and saw no missing days, but the gap in my memory was real. I couldn't explain where I had been or how much time had passed. I looked at the scar behind my ear in the mirror, and it was faint but visible. No pain, no swelling, just a perfect circle that hadn't been there before. I tried calling a friend just to hear a familiar voice. The call went through, and they acted like nothing was wrong. They hadn't noticed me missing. Everything in my life seemed normal except for me. I stood in the bathroom gripping the sink, realizing I was back, but I couldn't prove to anyone what had happened. I walked back into the kitchen and sat at the table with my phone in my hands, scrolling through my messages and emails again. Every timestamp lined up. Bills paid. Work schedule unchanged. Nobody asking where I'd been, the world moving forward as if I'd never left. I opened the camera and took a close photo of the scar behind my ear, saving it in a new folder labeled Evidence. Then I wrote down everything I could remember from the last few hours in a notebook, forcing myself to be factual. Time, sensations, what I saw, what I heard. No speculation, just data. When I finished, the page was half full, but the gaps between the facts were bigger than the facts themselves. I sat back staring at the words, aware that I was home, that everything looked normal, and yet nothing felt normal, and the only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't explain where I'd been or why they had sent me back. I closed the notebook and locked it in a drawer, then checked the doors and windows again, making sure everything was secured. My hands were still shaking, but my breathing had evened out. I plugged my phone into the charger and opened the camera to look at my face one more time. Same hair, same eyes. No marks except the small circle behind my ear. I searched for it online, scrolling through medical forums and images, but nothing matched exactly. I opened a blank email draft and began typing a short account of what had happened, attaching the photo of the scar, then saved it without sending. I needed proof in case my memory slipped again. The house was silent, nothing moving except the clock. I sat back at the table, staring at my hands, knowing I was back in my own kitchen, but unable to shake the feeling that some part of me hadn't returned with the rest. I pushed the laptop toward me and started a new document, copying the notes from the notebook line by line, adding times from my phone log to keep the sequence straight. I checked the power meter outside. It showed no interruption, no spike, everything steady, but that didn't explain the missing time. I called my workplace voicemail to check my own messages. My voice was there reminding myself of a shift tomorrow that I didn't remember recording. I saved that audio file to the same folder as the scar photo. The evidence was small, scattered, but it was all I had. I made a backup on a flash drive and hid it in the desk drawer under old papers. Then I sat back in the chair, staring at the folder on the screen, wondering if I was preparing proof for someone else or for myself when I eventually stopped believing any of this had happened. I woke up on the couch still in yesterday's clothes, the notebook open on the table, the laptop humming in sleep mode. I showered and forced myself into routine, but at work no one seemed to notice I had been gone. They greeted me like nothing had happened. During a break, I checked the scar in the mirror and the skin was red as if something had irritated it. When I pressed it, there was a vibration steady and separate from my pulse. It followed me through the day, strongest near electronics. My phone flickered when I checked the time. That night, I sat in the dark kitchen with the phone recording. I touched the scar and whispered questions. Who are you? What do you want? Why me? For a long moment, there was only my breathing. Then the phone speaker crackled and a distorted voice broke through saying monitoring continue. Normal routine adjustments pending. I sat frozen with the phone still in my hand, the screen dim but the audio icon pulsing even though I hadn't touched it. The voice stopped, but a faint hiss remained like static from a dead radio. I ended the recording and played it back. The words were gone, only silence and my own breathing. I checked the time and realized I'd been sitting there for almost an hour without noticing. My hands were cold and the vibration behind my ear had returned stronger than before. I opened the window to get air and saw a faint glow low over the tree line moving slowly and then vanishing. I shut the window and backed away. The house felt smaller, unfamiliar, like a set built to look like my home. The phone buzzed in my palm with a new notification that simply read, Phase 2. And I stood there in the dark kitchen, not sure if it had come from a real app or from something I couldn't delete. I powered the phone off and pulled the battery, set it on the table, and stepped back. The silence in the house felt heavier than the night outside. I grabbed the notebook from the drawer and wrote down everything exactly as it had happened. The scar, the voice, the message. I closed it and hid it deep under the floorboard in my bedroom. Then I sat on the bed, staring at the dark ceiling until my eyes burned. I told myself I was home. I told myself it was over. But the vibration behind my ear pulsed once more before going still, and in that moment I understood the truth. The abduction hadn't ended. It had only changed shape, and whatever they had started in me was still running, even here on Earth.